NTHE air in the delivery room was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the raw, primal energy of birth. 10 times my body had strained, 10 times I had pushed, and 10 times the miracle of life had unfolded before my eyes. 10 tiny, perfect beings, each a testament to my endurance, my love, my unwavering commitment. But as the last cry faded, replaced by the gentle murmurs of the nurses, a different sound pierced the sacred space, the scratch of a pen on paper. He stood there, not by my side, not marveling at the new lives we had created, but at a small table, his back to me, his shoulders hunched in a posture of cold finality. A nurse, her face a mask of discomfort, handed me a document. Divorce papers, signed. Beside my bed, moments after I had given birth to 10 of his children, my marriage ended. The ink on the page was still wet, a stark contrast to the tears that now streamed down my face, hot and silent. My heart, still reeling from the miracle of birth, was now being torn asunder, a gaping wound that threatened to consume me. The burning question wasn't what had just happened, but why. Why, at this moment of all moments, would he choose to sever the ties that bound us? What profound cruelty, what unimaginable betrayal could lead a man to abandon his wife and 10 newborn children in such a brutal, heartless manner? I looked at the signed papers, then at his retreating back, and a chilling realization began to dawn. This wasn't just about us, this was about them, my children, and his abandonment was only just beginning. NTHE sterile scent of the delivery room, once a symbol of new beginnings, now reeked of betrayal. The rhythmic beeping of the machines, meant to monitor life, felt like a countdown to the end of mine. 10 tiny bundles, swaddled in white, lay in their bassinets, their innocent breaths, a stark contrast to the suffocating silence that had descended upon the room. He had left, a ghost in the doorway, leaving behind not a tender touch or a whispered word of love, but a stack of legal documents, divorce papers, signed. The ink, still fresh, seemed to mock the fresh wounds on my body and soul. My mother, who had been a silent, supportive presence throughout the grueling labor, now held me, her own tears mingling with mine. Her touch was a lifeline, pulling me back from the abyss of despair. The nurses, their faces a mixture of pity and outrage, moved with a quiet efficiency, their hushed whispers a testament to the shock that permeated the room. They had witnessed the unholy exchange, life for abandonment, love for legal decree. I tried to speak, to scream, to demand an explanation, but my voice was a raw whisper, lost in the cavernous space that had suddenly opened between us. My body ached, but it was nothing compared to the searing pain in my chest. This wasn't the aftermath of childbirth I had envisioned. There were no tender embraces, no whispered words of love, no shared awe over our new arrivals. Instead, there was this chilling tableau of destruction and disdain. I looked at my children, their tiny faces serene in sleep, oblivious to the storm that raged around them. How could he look at them, at these innocent beings, and feel such hatred? Was it because they were girls? Was that the unforgivable sin? The thought was a venomous sting, poisoning the last vestiges of my hope. I had always believed in him, in us, in the future we were building. But in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of his rage, I saw a stranger, a cruel, unfeeling stranger who had just ripped apart not just baby clothes, but the very fabric of our shared dream. The betrayal was absolute, a wound that would fester long after my physical scars healed. I closed my eyes, wishing I could unsee, unhear, unfeel. But the image of his tearing hands, the sound of ripping cloth, and the cold, hard truth of his contempt were seared into my memory, a permanent brand of his cruelty. This was not the man I married. This was a monster, and I was trapped in his lair with 8 helpless angels, depending on me, NTHE hospital room, once a place of hope and new beginnings, became a prison. He rarely visited, and when he did, his presence was a suffocating weight. He would stand at the foot of my bed, his arms crossed, his gaze distant, as if I were a stranger, an inconvenience. He never once asked about the girls, never looked at them, never acknowledged their existence. It was as if they were invisible, a figment of my imagination, a burden he refused to acknowledge. The nurses, bless their kind hearts, tried to offer comfort, their eyes filled with pity and unspoken understanding. They brought me extra blankets, spoke in hushed tones, and tried to shield me from his chilling indifference. But nothing could shield me from the cold reality that had settled over my life. My mother, who had flown in to be with me, saw it immediately. Her eyes, usually so full of warmth, were now clouded with concern and a quiet fury. She tried to talk to him, to reason with him, but he simply walked away, leaving her words hanging in the air, unheard, unheeded. She held my hand, her touch a lifeline in the swirling chaos of my emotions. "He's not the man you thought he was, my love," she whispered, her voice thick with sorrow. Her words, though painful, were a confirmation of what my heart already knew. The man I loved, the man I had built a life with, was gone. In his place was this cold, unfeeling stranger, consumed by a darkness I couldn't comprehend. I looked at my daughters, their tiny fingers curled around mine, their innocent faces a beacon of pure, unadulterated love. They were my reason, my strength, my everything. I had to protect them, to shield them from the venom of his hatred. But how? How do you fight a ghost, a man who is present in body but absent in soul? The hospital room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. I longed to go home, to the familiar comfort of our house, but the thought filled me with dread. What awaited me there? More of his silent contempt? More of his chilling indifference? The future stretched before me, a vast, terrifying unknown. But one thing was clear. I was no longer just a wife, a mother. I was a warrior, and my battle had just begun. I would fight for my daughters, for their right to exist, for their right to be loved, and I would do it alone, if I had to. The cold reality was a bitter pill to swallow, but it also ignited a spark of defiance within me. I would not break. I would not surrender. I would endure. For them. Always for them. Returning home was not the relief I had craved. The house, once filled with laughter and the promise of a shared future, now felt like a mausoleum, echoing with unspoken threats. He was there, a silent, brooding presence, moving through the rooms like a shadow. He avoided my gaze, his silence a weapon, cutting deeper than any harsh word. The baby clothes, what little remained of them, were gone, swept away, as if their destruction had been a mere inconvenience, a fleeting moment of madness. But the memory of his rage lingered, a toxic residue in the air. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, to create a haven for my daughters amidst the storm. I fed them, changed them, sang lullabies, my voice a fragile shield against the pervasive tension. But every touch, every glance, every moment was tainted by the unspoken threat that hung heavy in the air. He would leave for hours, sometimes days, returning without explanation, his eyes colder than ever. I would find strange women's clothes in the laundry, a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his shirts. Each discovery was a fresh stab, a confirmation of his disdain, his utter disregard for me and our new family. I wanted to confront him, to scream, to demand answers, but fear held me captive, not for myself, but for my girls. What would his rage unleash if I pushed him too far? I had seen the darkness in his eyes, the chilling indifference that bordered on cruelty. I knew, instinctively, that he was capable of anything. My mother, who had stayed with me, saw it too. Her presence was a comfort, a silent understanding that transcended words. She would watch him, her eyes narrowed, a protective instinct radiating from her. "Be careful, my love," she would warn, her voice barely a whisper. He's a dangerous man." Her words echoed my own fears, solidifying the unspoken threat into a tangible presence. I started to sleep with one eye open, every creak of the floorboards, every rustle in the night, sending a jolt of fear through me. The house, my sanctuary, had become a battleground, and I was fighting a war one didn't understand, against an enemy I barely recognized. But I would not yield. My daughters were my fortress, my reason for enduring, and for them, I would face any threat, spoken or unspoken, with a strength I never knew I possessed. NNTHE isolation was crushing. He had effectively cut me off from the outside world, controlling every aspect of my life. My phone calls were monitored, my outings restricted, my every move scrutinized. I was a prisoner in my own home, my only companions, the innocent cries of my daughters, and the suffocating silence of his presence. But even in the darkest corners, whispers of justice began to stir. It started subtly, with a sympathetic glance from a grocery store clerk, a lingering hand from a distant relative, a hushed question from a neighbor. They saw the fear in my eyes, the exhaustion etched on my face, the silent plea for help. And slowly, cautiously, they began to reach out. A note slipped into my hand, a phone number whispered in passing, a quiet offer of support. Each small act of kindness was a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink of despair. My mother, ever vigilant, was my strongest ally. She began to document everything, meticulously noting his cruelties, his absences, his threats. She spoke to lawyers, to women's shelters, gathering information, building a case, a silent rebellion against his tyranny. I was hesitant at first, paralyzed by fear and the ingrained belief that I had to endure, to protect my children at all costs. But the whispers grew louder, becoming a chorus of encouragement, a promise of a future free from his shadow. I started to see the cracks in his facade, the subtle signs of his insecurity, his fear of exposure. He thrived on control, on my silence, on my fear. But with each whisper of justice, his grip began to loosen, his power to wane. I realized then that I wasn't alone. There were people who cared, who saw my suffering, who were willing to fight for me and my daughters. The thought filled me with a fragile hope, a flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness. The path to justice would be long and arduous, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a surge of defiance, a quiet determination to reclaim my life, to secure a future where my daughters could grow up in safety and love. The whispers had become a roar, and I was ready to listen. NNTHE decision was made. I would fight. The whispers of justice had solidified into a resolute roar within me, fueled by the unwavering love for my daughters. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce determination. My mother, a pillar of strength, connected me with a lawyer, a formidable woman with eyes that held both compassion and steel. She listened patiently as I recounted the horrors of the past few months, her pen scratching furiously across her notepad. Each word I spoke was a painful reliving, but also a release, a shedding of the burden I had carried alone for so long. The lawyer laid out the options, the legal battles ahead, the challenges we would face. It wouldn't be easy, she warned. He was a powerful man, with connections and resources, but she also assured me that justice, though slow, was often inevitable. We began to gather evidence, a meticulous collection of his abuses, his neglect, his chilling indifference. Photos of the shredded baby clothes, text messages filled with his venom, testimonies from concerned neighbors and family members. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the wall we were building, a fortress against his lies and manipulations. The storm was gathering, and I could feel the tension in the air, a palpable shift in the atmosphere of our home. He sensed it too. His silent contempt began to morph into a simmering rage, his eyes darting around, searching for the source of the change. He tried to reassert his control, to intimidate me with his presence, his harsh words. But I no longer cowered. I met his gaze, my own eyes reflecting a newfound strength, a quiet defiance that surprised even myself. The battle lines were drawn. He was the oppressor, and I, with my 8 innocent daughters, was the warrior. The stakes were impossibly high, the outcome uncertain. But I knew with every fiber of my being that I had to fight, not just for myself, but for the future of my girls, for their right to a life free from his darkness. The storm was coming, and I was ready to face it. Head-on, INTHE, Day of the Reckoning arrived, a culmination of months of silent suffering and meticulous preparation. The courtroom was a sterile, intimidating space, filled with hushed whispers and the weight of unspoken judgments. He sat across from me, his face impassive, a carefully constructed mask of innocence. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the subtle tremor in his hands, betraying the fear that gnawed at him beneath the surface. My lawyer, a beacon of strength and unwavering resolve, presented our case with precision and quiet power. She laid bare his cruelties, his neglect, his monstrous indifference to his own children, the shredded baby clothes, the discarded wedding veil, the countless acts of emotional and psychological abuse, each piece of evidence a damning indictment of his character. I testified, my voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each word, each painful memory I recounted. I spoke of the fear, the isolation, the constant threat that had hung over my life. I spoke of my daughters, their innocence, their vulnerability, and my unwavering determination to protect them. His lawyer, a slick, condescending man, tried to discredit me, to paint me as an unstable, vengeful woman. He twisted my words, questioned my sanity, tried to undermine my credibility, but I held firm, my gaze unwavering, my truth undeniable. Then came his testimony. He denied everything, spun a web of lies, portrayed himself as the victim, the loving husband and father who had been wronged. His words were smooth, convincing, designed to deceive. But I saw, through the facade, the hollowness of his claims. The judge, a stern but fair woman, listened intently, her expression unreadable. The hours dragged on, each moment a test of endurance, a battle of wills. But through it all, I held onto the image of my daughters, their faces a constant reminder of what I was fighting for. The verdict, when it finally came, was a wave of relief that washed over me, a cleansing tide after months of turmoil. Justice, slow and arduous, had finally found its way. He was exposed, his lies shattered, his cruelty laid bare for all to see. The reckoning was complete, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe freely, the suffocating weight lifted from my chest. The battle was won, but the war for healing had just begun. And I knew, with a certainty that transcended all doubt, that my daughters and I would emerge from this stronger, more resilient, and ultimately free. NNTHE courtroom doors closed behind me, and the sunlight, once a distant memory, now felt warm and welcoming on my face. The verdict had been delivered, a resounding affirmation of justice, a declaration of my freedom. He was gone from my life, his shadow banished, his power over me shattered. The relief was immense, a physical lightness that made me feel as if I could float. But it wasn't just relief, it was a profound sense of peace, a quiet joy that settled deep within my soul. My mother was there, her arms open, her eyes brimming with tears of pride and love. We embraced, a silent communion of shared struggle and hard-won victory. The journey had been long and arduous, filled with pain, fear, and uncertainty. But we had emerged, bruised but not broken, stronger than ever before. Returning home, the house no longer felt like a prison. It was a sanctuary, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with new memories, new laughter, new beginnings. I looked at my daughters playing in the living room, their innocent giggles echoing through the once silent halls. They were thriving, blossoming, their spirits untouched by the darkness that had once threatened to consume us. I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece, with the unwavering support of my family and friends. I found a new job, enrolled in classes, and started to rediscover the woman I had been before the storm. The scars remained, a testament to the battles I had fought, but they no longer defined me. They were a reminder of my strength, my resilience, my capacity for survival. And as I watched my daughters grow, their personalities blooming, their futures stretching bright before them, I knew that every struggle, every tear, every moment of fear had been worth it. Justice had found its way, not just in the courtroom, but in the quiet triumph of our everyday lives. We were free, we were safe, and we were loved. The dawn of a new beginning had arrived, and it was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. My story was not one of victimhood, but of victory, a testament to the enduring power of love, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. And as I held my daughters close, I knew that our future, unburdened by the past, was finally ours to write.